The Cloud Summit. Oh, looks like we just started. So welcome everybody to the Cloud Summit after party. Hope you all enjoyed the event. Seeing some comments start to stream in already on the old YouTube, and I'm hoping everybody can hear me loud and clear. Give me a shout out in the comments if you're able to hear my audio. Yes, no, maybe so. I can't tell. All right, I'm going to assume people can hear me. My name is Andrew Duthie. I am a developer advocate here at OutSystems, and looking forward to answering your questions regarding OutSystems and AWS. I am joined by a number of experts in the field from both OutSystems and AWS, and I'm just going to introduce them in the order that I see them on my screen. First up is James Bland, who is with AWS. And James, why don't you introduce yourself briefly and tell us about what you can help with?
Hello, my name is James Bland. I am the global tech lead here at AWS. I am currently based in Southern California, more specifically Los Angeles. Thanks, Andrew.
All right, next up is João Santos from OutSystems. João, I believe you are kind of all things AWS server side for us, right? Kind of platform and AWS combined. Is that an accurate summation?
It's decent. Yes. Yeah.
All right. Now you can correct me and make me feel bad.
No,
go for it. Please tell us about what you're here for and what kind of questions you can answer.
Yeah. So I'm a product manager. All things cloud and AWS. So yes, I can certainly help with product abilities and product direction.
Perfect. Next up, Rui Barrosa, my teammate from the developer advocacy team. Rui is an OutSystems veteran and deep expert on lots and lots of OutSystems app technologies. Whenever there's something I don't know, Rui is the one that I tend to ask. And then, of course, now it's like, you're building me up too much. It's really bad.
Yeah.
Rui, tell us what do you want to answer today?
I don't know. Hey, you said everything, right? I'm a developer advocate working on Andrew's team, and he over exaggerates. So we'll see. But cheers, good to be here.
I don't know, the Netflix clone that you built was pretty awesome. So.
It was an Amazon Prime clone.
Oh, sorry. Amazon Prime clone. I'm already messing things up with the branding. Fire me now. I'm a bad person, but still very, very cool. And last but certainly not least, Pedro Oliveira, who used to run the demo team and now runs our solution architecture team. And Pedro, tell us a little bit about yourself and your role.
Of course, and I almost like your pronunciation of my name, actually. It's Oliveira, but almost there. So I'm a bit like Rui. I'm kind of a veteran around here, so I've been in a bunch of different roles over time. Currently, like you mentioned, I'm managing our global solution architecture team. So I'm very often in touch with our customers and prospects, people which are kind of working through adopting the product. And so, I mean, a bunch of different topics around OutSystems, app dev, and others, which I'd be happy to chime in, probably in the same space as Rui, whenever we can tag team to complement each other's answers. We're probably going to do a good job there, I hope.
Perfect. So great. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. I'm going to encourage all the people who are viewing on the live stream, please, if you've got questions or anything you'd like to ask of our panelists, please drop those in the chat. One of the first things I wanted to bring up, because it comes up all the time, and Pedro, I'm going to throw this over to you. One of the first things people come in when they start thinking about a platform like OutSystems, like a visual platform. I've had a lot of talks in the past with people about like drag and drop or visual development, and they're always worried about like, what kind of walls am I going to run into here? Like, when am I going to hit the wall of what I can and can't do in this kind of platform? So I wonder if you could address that a little bit, like what limitations are customers likely to run into when it comes to building applications in OutSystems and with respect to OutSystems and AWS specifically?
Sure, sure. I mean, it's going to be a bit of a fuzzy answer, like always, right? But ultimately, there's obviously a pretty large space of what you can actually address with OutSystems in a fully visual way. I mean, if you've been here for the duration of the Cloud Innovation Summit, you've probably seen Rui and others doing a bunch of different things fully visually with OutSystems, and that actually tackles pretty much everything from the data layer to the UI, and including integrations, a bunch of other things. But the really cool thing about OutSystems is that it does have limitations. Obviously, you cannot do absolutely everything visually, but it does have the extension points. So let's say you want to do something with machine learning with OutSystems. I mean, you may eventually think about designing a machine learning model in OutSystems directly, but why would you, right? You can very easily just integrate into the machine learning capabilities of AWS and actually get that connection going and make OutSystems be able to address that, even if it's by a very, very quick integration to a third-party service. And that's probably the same thing in the UI layer. I mean, if you're doing, for example, a mobile app, if you find very specific gaps, you can just get in a native plugin and cover that gap, for example. So there's obviously specific bits, but you can do, I don't know, probably 95, 99% of what you aim to do visually. And you can really cover those gaps through extension and integration for anything which doesn't fit that bucket.
So when we think about something like, for example, I did a video recently on doing a chatbot with Amazon Lex, right? That rather than writing out a bunch of code, you take advantage of a connector and you configure that connector, and then you use the actions and methods that are available on that connector in your visual flows. Is that kind of what you were talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can very easily wrap extensions or integrations into visual elements that you can just use visually and get very, very high productivity on top of those.
Right. Yeah. And so instead of having to figure out, okay, well, which method do I need to call and what arguments does it take? You're really kind of dealing with nodes in a visual flow, and the inputs and outputs are very clear from that kind of perspective.
And like you mentioned, I mean, there's one of the cool things is not only you have the freedom to create any extension to pretty much anything in spaces like many of the great services from AWS, we actually have those connectors already in place. You can just install them from the Forge. Someone has actually done the work of packaging the cost of the services, the authentication into an easily reusable connector. You can just visually drag and drop that into your code. You don't really even have to understand the details of how that connection works, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. Rui, do you have any comments on that? I mean, I know you've done a lot of work with building Forge components to connect to various systems. How would you kind of approach that from the limitation standpoint?
Well, there are obvious limitations, right? So we are on a web application paradigm, right? So if you want to do a desktop application, that's not going to work. Right? So it's out of the box. You have that. What I find particularly interesting with OutSystems, it's that it's very hard to get stuck, right? So if I really need to do something, you can actually extend the platform either through C# or pure JavaScript, right? So let's say, for a couple of examples that I like to mention, at some point we had the need to use some cryptographic functions in JavaScript. So it's easy to grab the web APIs and just build a wrapper around those methods, package them in a way that makes sense for a developer to use, create a component, and there you go. Now you have a bunch of cryptographic APIs in JavaScript available to the platform. Another example is a few years ago, we wanted to have a MongoDB support, right? So a NoSQL support in there. And we have just done it for DynamoDB, right? So what do? We grab the C# SDKs, right? And we build a little wrapper around them and bring that functionality into the platform. So it's really easy to extend, and it's really easy to work around any perceived limitations, right? So a lot of the folks, first time they see OutSystems, they go, "Oh, this is not really coding. The guy's just dragging and dropping stuff." But there's much more than meets the eye, or that much more than it's on the surface. And most often you can find workarounds around any perceived limitations.
Right.
Yeah, I would even actually, in a way, question your comment about no desktop applications being built without systems, in the sense that we have actually, in the last, 1 or 2 years, we've released PWAs. And PWAs actually, to a great degree, actually allow covering that gap to offline desktop-enabled applications. It's obviously not exactly what you think as fat client desktop applications. It's still a web paradigm, but it kind of goes in that direction. So there's actually a bunch of scenarios which are now possible with PWA support and the ability to create PWAs, which actually map to some of what would be limitations in the past in terms of desktop support and offline support and running stuff on your laptop disconnected from the network.
And I wanted to mention that Rui mentioned DynamoDB. We actually have a quick hits video that covers that topic. So I'll post that in the chat as well. Anything else we wanted to cover on that particular question?
I think we're good.
Okay, cool. So next question we've got comes from Greg Witten. And Greg asks, when will we be able to use WebSockets with an enterprise cloud instance of OutSystems? So I think, Joao, you mentioned you might want to jump on that one.
Sure. Yeah, very good question. We are very interested in understanding the use cases. The way we see it right now, what we would like to offer in this area is a great experience in adding WebSockets capabilities to OutSystems application in general. And we know that it's not anything specific to cloud or to OutSystems on AWS specifically. And so yes, this is certainly something that we will look into in the future, and we'll want to understand use cases and how we can provide a great experience so that you can easily explore that technology as well with OutSystems.
Cool. All right, so next question I want to tackle came from earlier in one of the sessions, and that question is, have you experienced OutSystems as forgiving if you make design choices at first you regret later? And the question is really kind of focused on refactoring. So I'm going to throw that to Rui, since I know Rui's built a lot of applications, and Pedro, if you want to chime in on that as well, I think you guys would probably be good on that.
Well, OutSystems is a developer language, right? So it's a development language. So you will do pretty much the same mistakes because OutSystems is so efficient in creating code. You probably do the mistakes a little bit faster, right? So it is, however, very easy to refactor things in OutSystems. So you can turn a project upside down and easily and with confidence refactor your code. There's a lot of tools and a lot of dashboards that can monitor the state of your architecture and complete maps of the dependencies. So because we use this visual meta model for the development, we have a lot of meta information about the development, right? So we know exactly which libraries connect with the other ones. We know all the mapping of the dependencies, and we can track all that information. So it becomes pretty easy to do refactoring on the OutSystems platform.
Yeah, I think the really cool part there is what you mentioned, right? All the meta information we have allows you to know what you're breaking, right? If you're doing a major refactoring and you start changing a bunch of stuff around between different modules, different places, you know exactly what you've broken. You don't have to wait for a bunch of compile cycles to know what you've broken. You just know what you have to go and fix, and you're going to have all that at your fingertips. And there's also architecture dashboard, right? That's something we've released, I don't know, about a year ago, which is really, really cool in helping you find out stuff like you've duplicated code in a bunch of different places. You need to go to refactor that. It helps you see how things are being architected. So that does help with refactoring. Though, like you said, I mean, you can make all the same mistakes at the beginning. Which I just think they're easier to fix if you're if you're doing that with OutSystems.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I mean, like when I got started with OutSystems, one of the things that I found really impressive was the fact that in most cases, when I go and rename something inside of an OutSystems application, that renaming flows to everywhere that name is used. That, because it's a meta model rather than just being raw code, it's easy for us to track those usages throughout an application. It's easy to go in and find, okay, I've got this, this widget here, where is it used? Or this action, where is it used? And find all of those usages, figure out where I'm going to be impacting if I need to do a refactoring. And architecture dashboard is just kind of like in some ways, the icing on the cake. So good stuff, guys. All right. So, So a couple of things. So another question that came up that I think would be interesting to talk about is really kind of the relationship between OutSystems and AWS. That is like, okay, how do I connect to AWS, and am I deploying on AWS? Like, how do these things work together? I know kind of my view on that, but I'm going to kind of throw it over first to Joao to kind of give his take, and then we can see who else wants to weigh in.
Sure. I mean, first of all, AWS is a very trusted partner for OutSystems, where we count on the reliability and the breadth of services that AWS provides to power really what's crucial to our business, which is it's the OutSystems cloud, and so that's the primary angle of our relationship with AWS. And beyond that,
when you say the OutSystems cloud, you mean the OutSystems platform, but running on top of AWS. So
correct.
So the customer doesn't have to worry about buying a server, buying the operating system, installing all of the pieces of the OutSystems platform. They just sign a contract with OutSystems. We spin everything up, and they log in with their development environment. Right?
That's exactly it.
And that's sitting on top of AWS.
Yeah, and on top of that, so as you mentioned, it's not only the installation bits of the OutSystems platform, but it's even the fact that it's all a single service. So our ability to support you when we control the full environment is better, of course. And so in fact, you can just build applications and worry with and leave the system administration part to us. So it provides a much better experience for the customers where that is the right deployment option. So that's the first pillar of our relationship. But we gone beyond that with events like this, joint commercial activity. Customers that have they want to use a lower level AWS infrastructure directly and still run OutSystems platform, that works great as well. And in general, the more and more the ability to get those AWS services easily available in a local environment, as you've seen throughout the sessions today.
Right. So I want to kind of dig deeper on that. We talked about kind of the connector model and connecting to AWS services. We recently released, some of the accelerators for the cloud accelerators for AWS. Let me throw it over to James, just like in terms of if people are just getting, like, let's say somebody's coming from the OutSystems perspective and they need to get started with AWS. Talk a little bit about what that looks like for the various services.
Yeah, so obviously AWS has a ton of services. we have over 86 now, something like that. And those are major services, and within each one of them, there's like a ton of different features, right? And so one of the things we're hearing from a lot of our customers, right, is that hey, with this, the number of services that we have, how expansive it is, it's actually very difficult to kind of like get started, right? Like get in, because you kind of have to know how all the building blocks kind of fit together.
Right.
And that's kind of what we think of, like, like we internally, we talk about AWS's building blocks as kind of like Lego pieces, right? And you kind of have to know how that fits together. And that's kind of why we look at like partners like OutSystems to kind of help us with that user experience, right? For people who don't really want to get into the details and understand, like, hey, I need an RDS cluster for this. I need, like DynamoDB, or I need, like EC2 instances, containers. And so that's where like partners like OutSystems kind of really shine and help kind of improve the user experience for us.
Great. Yeah. So when folks are getting started, what are their options in terms of, like, let's just take Lex for an example. If somebody wants to build a Lex chatbot, do they have to figure out how to pay for that out of the box, or can they get started for free? Like,
yeah, usually
that a little bit.
Yeah, customers would basically, you just come in, sign up for an AWS account to get started. We have relatively like free tiers for each of the different accounts, and it just depends on the different services that you're offering. Like free tiers usually let you get started for free, kind of like trial things out. And then once you get past experimentation, then you want to kind of like build on top of that, right? And that's where it starts to get a bit interesting. And like and what I mean by a bit interesting is that that's when you have to start learning how to piece things together, have to learn how to do like security, like setting up proper infrastructure, making sure that you have like an external facing VPC, internal facing VPC, and you kind of segregate all these things, and it starts to get a little bit complex at that point.
Right. Yeah, so learning how to navigate the IAM.
Yes, yeah, roles, policies. Yeah, it could start to get very daunting quickly.
Right. Which is, unfortunately, that's a reality of technology in general. It's hard to escape complexity at some points, but as you noted, that's kind of where OutSystems comes in, is to try to mitigate at least some of that complexity, and make working with a variety of services as simple as we possibly can. I forget who the quote was from, but that we want to make things as simple as possible, but no simpler. Right? Cool. So so I'm gonna.
While you're thinking about the next question, if I may chime in as well, I think another aspect that we should kind of touch on. Even if you sign up for a pre-version, for a pre-P, that's going to be running on AWS. If you couple that with the trial from the AWS side for Lex, you can actually get some really cool experimentation going there.
Yeah.
And if you do want to buy OutSystems, you can actually even do that from the AWS marketplace, which is also a cool way to get all this connected and integrated in a single way for all of our services together, right?
Yeah. But I do think that that's an important point, that most of what we've shown during the Cloud Innovation Summit, you can test and try and experiment without any cost whatsoever. So that's a good thing for budgets. So one of the questions that I see here that I think would be really interesting to talk about is, as a new user of OutSystems less than 1 year, a struggle I've found is difficulty in having my own style while building my applications. I'm assuming by style, we're talking probably like the visual, like the UI, UX of the application. Is there a way to personalize existing components, or maybe quickly build my own components? So Pedro, do you want to kind of take a whack at that?
Sure. And I don't know exactly where the question is coming from, so I don't know what's all the detail, but I think there's probably multiple levels there, right? There's a significant portion of let's call it the UI design and the UI capabilities, which come with what we call the OutSystems UI. It's really the pre-built, the bundled library of patterns and style guides, right? And there's a bunch of things which just come prepackaged, and if you're composing from those, it's really, really easy to get your visuals in place. We also have that not only for the developer side, but we also have all of that represented in the Figmas and the Sketch version, so that you can get developers and designers really collaborating on how things assemble.
So
Now, all of
just
the-
so I'm
Go
just so
ahead.
I'm clear, there, Figma and Sketch are kind of design tools.
Yeah, sorry.
So
Yeah,
basically,
exactly.
if I'm kind of working with a team to come up with a UI or UX for an application, I can take Figma or Sketch and get OutSystems UI, this design language specific widgets and such, so I can work with those design tools and bring full fidelity into my application
Exactly.
using the
Exactly.
same widgets.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
Cool.
you're going to have those widgets in all those, well, in Figma and Sketch. And then when your designers are using them, you can use basically the same widgets in Service Studio in our IDE and really replicate that exact same look and feel very, very easily.
Okay,
Now,
so let me just jump in here real quick.
Yeah,
So
sure.
that's great for consistency, right? It makes
Now,
it
getting
easy
your
to
own
get a
style,
good,
right?
consistent look and feel, but all your applications start looking and feeling the same. Is that because
Exactly.
that's the sense that I got from the question is, okay, great. So I can build this UI that looks really polished, but it doesn't necessarily look the way I want it to look.
Mhm. So what's next, right? So this is like the baseline. This is what you get for free out of the box. It's all
Right.
bundled, very low effort to get that in place, right? Now there's different levels of customization you can do on top of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
The baseline is you're gonna change the look and feel from a coloring, from a font, from a sizing perspective, and we actually have something which is the theme customizer, the theme editor, which allows you to do part of that visually, and you can add additional CSS to get something which is a lot more fine-tuned within the same UI elements, right?
Right.
Well, the third level is you can actually bundle your own UI library. You can actually create your own UI library, right?
Mhm.
Kind of on all of that extensibility we mentioned on before.
Right.
That's also true for the UI. You can actually visually create your individual UI components and use your own CSS to customize them and to style them. And you can have have an absolutely different style guide, which is your own company specific or developer specific style guide, which then you compose visually with high productivity once you've actually invested in creating all of these specific UI elements, which you don't see mapped within the default stuff that comes bundled with the technology with OutSystems.
And I think that that's a great point, that it may be an investment to get a fully custom style guide, but once you've done that, the reuse is the same as what you'd have with anything else.
Absolutely.
I also wanted to bring up a story because I think you were still working with the demo team when we built this. I don't know if you recall, but we decided we wanted to do a demo for a conference where we had a self-balancing robot and we wanted to drive that from an OutSystems application. And I always thought of OutSystems applications as being kind of largely enterprisey and forms over data, and it's pretty standard stuff that you'd see for web applications. And the demo team actually put together, they actually pulled in several different JavaScript-based components, one of which was basically just a joystick controller, and it had visual elements as well as all of the JavaScript necessary to track finger movements on a tablet. And they actually built a completely custom UI from the ground up for controlling this Bluetooth robot. And we just had a blast demonstrating that application, really kind of showing that they're really, the sky's the limit in terms of if you want to build something custom, you can totally go hog wild with it. And so, the power of being able to bring in things on the UI side, as well as the power of being able to kind of connect to anything you want to or need to on the back end side.
Yeah.
There's a lot of flexibility there.
Yeah, that was actually a very neat example because we both did a bunch of customization on the UI side. We also did all the Bluetooth connection to the dinosaur. I think one of the toys was a dinosaur.
One of them was a dinosaur. Yep, one of them was a dinosaur. One of them was a little robot, and then I also have one that's one of the minions from the Despicable Me movies. So
yeah, and the cool thing is once we got those bits in, both the Bluetooth side and those JavaScript libraries for the joystick, it's all visual code connecting all of this, right? So you still get very high readability and very high productivity in changing that.
Cool. So wanted to throw it open to our panelists if there's anything else you all wanted to cover specifically before I jump into another question. Put you on the spot.
So I actually think we had a question coming in one of the previous sessions about Lex and the languages supported by Lex, right?
Sure.
We should probably...
So yeah, let me throw this one over to James. Question came up during the chatbot session about what languages Lex supports from the interaction with the bot perspective. I don't know if you have that off the top of your head, or maybe pull that up real
James
quick.
is probably looking at the AWS website right now and speaking on mute as well. Yes, James is speaking on mute.
James, I think you're muted. We're not hearing you.
I think this is we're talking
we go.
speaking languages and not programming languages here.
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah, let me look this up. I probably won't be able to cover all of them because it's probably I'm assuming it's a lot.
So I know that while you're checking that out, the same thing occurred to me, is like, oh, is the question related to speaking and typing, or is the question related to programming languages for something like the Lambda integration? Because I know that there's quite a few languages supported for that as well, but I think this one's really more typing and speaking.
Yeah. So right now the current languages supported are German, English, Australian, English British, English US, Spanish Latin American, Spanish in Spain, Spanish US, French Canadian, French from France, Italian from Italy, and Japanese in Japan.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right. So a couple other things that, let's see. Sorry, just looking through chat and such. Maybe this one, I'll throw this one to Rui. One question that came up is, where can I learn more about getting started with OutSystems, training, try for free, etc.?
Well, on the OutSystems website, that's for sure, right? All our online training is available on our site, and it's available for free. So you can just dive in and select one of the guided paths and start learning OutSystems. My recommendation is that you actually start with the path related with mobile development, because it includes both the normal web application, the reactive web applications, and the mobile part, and then try to do an application for yourself, right? As Pedro was saying, we will provide you with an environment, with your personal environment, which is free. Mm-hmm. It's not a time trial. It's not a 30-day trial or anything like that. No credit card required. So it's yours forever, as long as you want to use it. And you can use that to practice or learn about OutSystems, right? Once you do that, build an app, right? Build an app for your family, for your soccer club, for your any particular interest that you have, a friend, whatever, right? Just build an app. Go through the motions of building an app, and then continue to explore the guided paths, right? So we have these 3 introductory guided paths, reactive web and mobile, and also traditional. And then we have something a little more advanced, right? So architecture, some things specific for front-end development, things specific for integrations, and so on, right? So once you get through the base and build an application, then you can explore a little bit more and go into your comfort zone or your specialization there.
Perfect. So one of the things that, I have to say, like when I started with OutSystems almost 4 years ago now, one of the things that kind of blew me away was the guided path trainings I found to be really fantastic ways to kind of really take a deep dive into the platform, but also like the actual in-app tutorial. Like you start up Service Studio or our integrated development environment, and you could just get kicked right into a build your first app, and it's like a 5-minute, walkthrough. It just was.
Yeah.
It really reminded me of how so I come from a Visual Basic background, so it was like this is like the best parts of what I learned back then, and without some of the kind of hairy parts of I double click a button and I fall into this pit of code and I have no idea what I'm doing. Right? I really kind of enjoyed that. So, I think this. I'm not sure who this question would be best for, but I'll throw it over to Joao and see if he can tackle it, or we can try and get an answer for it in the future. Rohan asks, is there anything in the future we can? It looks like are we going to be able to use architecture dashboard for personal environment? So I don't know if you know that, Joao, or put you on the spot here.
Sure. I mean, our philosophy for the personal environment is really that you should be able to explore full functionality of OutSystems from within the personal environment. So that's the direction. Mm-hmm. We know that we are not there 100% of the situations, and you just highlighted one of them. So, but direction we would like to solve that, and so it will depend on cost, complexity, plans, but that can certainly happen in the future. So we will
it's a definite yes. We don't know the exact date for that.
Okay. Sounds good.
Sounds like that, right? Cool.
So I think that gets us through our list of questions. Maybe give a second for anybody who might want to ask one more last question from the chat. Oh, I did have one more question. I know I really wanted this is something we get asked all the time, and I'm sorry, Pedro, I'm gonna put you on the spot for this one. Something that comes up a lot is OutSystems for like business people or developers? Like, what's the role of citizen developer? Where does all that fit with OutSystems?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and there's actually different aspects here. So, core product, Service Studio. I mean, pretty much almost everything that you've seen probably in the Cloud Innovation Summit. It's really for developers. It's for real developers, right? You need to know algorithms. You need to know data modeling. You need to understand how the web works. So if you have that background, that development background, you can very easily transfer that into OutSystems and apply the very same concepts, but at a higher level, right? At a more productive level, you can apply the same concepts and really become effective as a developer in OutSystems. And you do need to be a developer to be able to do most of that, right? Mm-hmm. We do have a number of people which fall outside this, and more specifically, we now have specific builders which tackle more of the business people, more of the citizen developer persona, let's call it this way. Mm-hmm. So you may have heard about the workflow builder, for example, which allows you to kind of design a form, design a workflow with multiple steps, routing, and all of that. And that is something which business people can actually do in full self-service without any help from IT. Mm-hmm. And we have the connections in place, right? So we can actually get those teams in place where you have the business people working on workflow builder, but being able to leverage some of the magic that the developers are doing in the core product, in the more developer-focused stuff, which is, to be honest, most of what we do at this stage.
Right. So, but with that being said, IT still has control, right? IT owns the platform. Things don't just magically get published to production.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's actually the way we have it set it up. It's really that even if you have these this business personas building these workflows, mm-hmm. all of the validity checking and the staging and the deployment steps, all of that stuff still goes through the same flows, which are controlled by IT. So we have the measures in place to make sure it's actually governed. It's not you're not risking your business by just letting people go wild.
Right. Yeah, because I mean one of the concerns that often happens is, right, if you make things available to business users or business analysts or citizen developers, you end up with a lot of kind of shadow IT, you know, with a lot of completely unmanageable apps. And I think it's important to emphasize that the builders are really an opportunity to afford those people the ability to work in in kind of a controlled sandbox, right, where they've got the ability to contribute to the application portfolio, but in a more managed and kind of guided way.
Yep, absolutely true.
Yeah, and I would highlight also, in addition to Workflow Builder, I would highlight Experience Builder, right, as a great tool for allowing people who aren't necessarily the deep level devs to produce kind of the application flow and really kind of provide a prototype that's built on top of good practices and good code, so that the development team then can come and bring that into a more fully fleshed application, fully functional. So it's really an opportunity to allow teams to work together. It's definitely not an effort to eliminate the role of professional developers, because I think the pro devs are always going to be an essential part of building, enterprise applications. So last question, and then we'll probably wrap things up. So a question comes from Alfonso. I'm going to say it in English. How do you consider the learning curve? So what's the learning curve on OutSystems?
Let me try to get a stab on this one. Well, compared with other technologies, learning curve in OutSystems is really, really shallow, right? So you let's assume for a moment that you have a developer, right? So someone that is already a developer, and he switches between C# to Java or something like that, or from JavaScript to Haskell or whatever, right? In OutSystems, it will be a lot easier. So from those two perspectives, very, very easy to move from one point to the other. The typical comment that I get is in the beginning, right, when the developer is faced with the IDE, with Service Studio, is where are the buttons? Where do I press? How do I go? Where do I go? But that feeling quickly goes away as you start understanding where things are and how Studio kind of separates the UI from the code, from the data structures, and so on, right? So I would say it's very, very shallow.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I would caveat that simply by saying it's like anything else, that you can become proficient very quickly, but to become expert obviously is going to take longer, simply because once you start diving into topics like we covered the topic of UI customization, and the idea of like building an application with OutSystems is a very shallow learning curve. Building your own style guide, that would be I think a little bit more involved and would certainly require more learning. Customizing via C#, as you mentioned, Rui, that's a deeper level of learning. It's not impossible to do. I mean, I was building C# components for OutSystems within the first couple of months that I was at the company, but I also come from a .NET, and
Exactly.
I spent many years building stuff in .NET, so I kind of had a leg up there. So I think it's like anything else, right? It depends on what you're trying to do in order to determine what the learning curve is. The last thing, and then I promise we'll wrap up and let our panelists get back to their families and dogs and days. Eduardo asks, can we share LinkedIn profile to connect with the community? I'm going to use that as an opportunity to promote our community forums. If you go to outsystems.com/forums, that is a great way to connect with the OutSystems community. You can ask questions, post discussion topics, etc. So I strongly encourage to head over to outsystems.com/forums and check things out there. So with that, I'm going to wrap things up. Thank you all. Thanks, James. Thanks, Joao. Thanks, Rui. Thanks, Pedro. I am again Andrew, and thank you all for attending. Hope you all had a great time and learned a lot. And we will see you next time.
All right. Thank you,
Sayonara.
everyone. Cheers. And hey, go build the apps. We're using
Yes,
OutSystems.
build apps, build apps, build apps.